smaller. Yes.
So we need to have some effect. Does that work?
I think it's only pictures on the
It's just pictures.
Just pictures.
Just pictures. I'm not that sophisticated.
Okay.
I suspect that rain has spoiled you. Movie clothes.
Maybe can start slowly. Yeah, since you're ready and everyone, most people are here already. No, let me do some introduction. So, good afternoon. We are very happy to have Professor Carroll Smith-Rosenberg here to give us a series of talks. She has given her first talk at Central University last week, Wednesday, and she's going to give the second and third here, okay, in our institute. Professor Smith-Rosenberg is Mary Franz-Berry Collegiate Professor of History, primarily history, and also American culture and women's studies, okay, at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. She has several very remarkable contributions. Of course, the first will be the path-breaking effort in the making of the United States women and gender history, okay. And then also developing interdisciplinary program and international scholarly network addressing women's history, gender history studies, and history of sexuality, but also the culture, the study of Atlantic studies. Her book, The Violent Empire, The Birth of an American National Identity, that book won a Choice Award for Distinguished Scholarly Book in 2011. And her article, The Female World of Love and Rachel, also established the legitimacy of lesbian history in the field. Okay. And her recent project that concerns our topic here, and also the two lectures here, is a historical trajectory of struggles for human rights and political agency. So the first talk here is Race, Rights, and Revolution, Democratic Enigmas, Relentless Struggles, and the Modern Republic History. This will be followed up with Wednesday's talk, White Slave, Black Revolutionaries, Who Has the Right to Have Rights? Who has the right to resist? Explorations of the U.S. and the Haitian Revolution. And today's talk, I think, there are some very interesting and very important problematic that's being raised. That is this very problematic concept or system of the republic democracy. And also the incongruence or the inconsistency between the Constitution and the concept of emancipation through the age of revolution, and then the Citizenship Act that exclude. Okay, so the question she asks, the UN Declaration of Human Rights has become a hollow promise, the cry of never again, a cruel mockery. How were the age of revolution's brave promises of freedom and democracy, liberty and equality so brutally betrayed? I think this is also the question we have been asking in this semester, because whatever happened in the European countries had its effect or aftermath in non-European world, the colonial expansion, the entire empire, and also slave trade and other things. Even this law of citizenship was used in the colonies in Vietnam, Indochina, Malaysia, Indonesia, and they inherited and practiced it locally into a different form of internal colonization. So I think there are several things we need to pay attention to today, okay, following Professor Smith-Rosenberg's talk. That is Constitution and this gap between the Constitution and human rights. Obvious violation of human rights in the same society because of the Constitution and because of the Citizenship Act. And also the differentiation of citizenship in the same society. So we are talking about living in the same city, just like the 2-day conference we had last weekend. We are talking about why basic labor standard law cannot be applied to migrant workers. Why the children of migrant workers became stateless orphans without medical care, without education support. Because in the UN there are several conventions concerning the stateless person's status and also reduction of stateless person. It's not only refugees, but all those people whose statehood were deprived, okay? But that can also happen among citizens or among this society. So we are talking about the gap between law and the differentiated rights. And so also those, particularly for those people who live here together, work here together, devote together, assist the other, but they are deprived of their basic rights to participate socially and politically. So those are the things we are still asking. But I think Professor Smith-Rosenberg will give us a very good genealogical trajectory of this past, how that was proposed and how that was betrayed. Okay, so I'll give the time to Professor Carroll Rosenberg, Smith-Rosenberg, but let's welcome her first.
Well, I want to thank all the people who have made my trip possible and have made it extremely. Well, first let me say that all talks have to be an exchange. And the first exchange that I need from you is that if you cannot hear me, or if you can't understand me, please start doing your upper body exercises. Wave your arms, it's very good for the breathing also. Indicate to me that you can't hear, because there's no point my mumbling on if you can't understand what I'm saying. So this has to be our first contract, is that you will let me know if you cannot hear. And since I have to read, turn the pages, and hold this all at once, and I'm very inept at best, this may slip, and so if you can't hear me, please interrupt, wave at me, wink at me, do something. And, okay, can you hear me now? This is the ad for mobile phones in the United States. Can you hear me now? So that is my question, and please interrupt. And interrupt if I'm saying something that is very unclear, which is very possible. It may be very clear in my mind, but not anywhere else. You know, Robert Browning said, when I wrote that, God and I knew what it meant. Now only God does. So if that happens in this talk, please let me know that I'm not being clear, because the whole purpose of this is to exchange ideas, to really get feedback from you. You get my lecture, and that we have an exchange of ideas, and that to me is the most important thing about this trip. So I hope we have these agreements. And as Joyce was saying, I want to thank Joyce and Alan and Radha and Goran and of course Ray for making this all possible, and it's very thrilling for me to be here and to be here after you've just had this big conference on foreign laborers. And so when I started this book, which I will not tell you how many years ago it was, but it was quite a few, I was concerned about the issue of why is liberalism always so easily betrayed? Why does it always cave in under the least backlash against it? And I'm sorry to say that this question has only become more and more relevant. Usually you want your book to be relevant. I think it's a tragedy that my book is increasingly relevant. And so the question is, we live in a crisis of statelessness, a crisis of refugees and asylum seekers, of water walls and Klieg lights and guard dogs, and how do we get out of this without just annihilating whole populations? This is a question about China today and the Muslim population in China. It's the United States, it's Europe, it's India, it's Kashmir, lynching in the streets of India. So everywhere we look, we're facing this nationalism, populism, which is even more threatening, perhaps, than what we dealt with in the 1930s. So these are very critical issues. You're living through it, I'm living through it. So I'm hoping we can have a discussion. So, and you can hear me now? Okay. All right, because I had problems. My first lecture, I was told I was not very clear. So I'm trying, and I'm also thinking the old theatrical thing, speak from your diaphragm. So I will try to work on that. Revolution, Race, and Rights, Democratic Enigmas, Ethical Conundrums, and the Modern Republic. I think that describes us, I suspect. And the beginning of my lecture is going back to the beginning. Now, political democracy, Republican governance, universal rights are not concepts new to the 20th or 21st century, although the challenges they face today are especially daunting and their demise repeatedly predicted. Rather, they were the imagined offspring of the age of revolution, a time of chaos, transformation, and struggle as challenging as our own, but a time as well of excitement and of hope, when the political world seemed about to be remade and the promise of freedom unlimited. For nearly 150 years, from Britain's glorious revolution in 1689 to the 1820s and the rise of republics throughout Latin America, increasingly radical political uprisings crisscrossed the Atlantic, from London and the Glorious Revolution to Philadelphia and the American Revolution, back to Paris and the French Revolution, on to Ireland, the Netherlands, Hungary, back again across the Atlantic to Guadeloupe, Haiti, and Latin America. Tumbling one after another in intense interaction with one another, these revolutions proclaimed that all men were free, equal, and endowed with unalienable rights. The governments rested upon the consent of the people. They challenged the concept of absolute monarchies and the empires those monarchies spawned. They gave birth to post-colonial republics throughout the Americas, and for the first time in history questioned the legitimacy of human slavery. Bringing all these revolutionary challenges together, they spearheaded the torturous processes by which modern republic and democratic citizenship took form. The insistence on man as a free, rights-bearing political agent, grounded in John Locke's two treatises of government, and the radical French philosophe's celebration of the equality and natural rights of man, reinforced by Thomas Jefferson's bold pronouncement that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights, by the French Revolution's Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, Tom Paine's electrifying pamphlet, The Rights of Man, and the successful struggle of Haiti's slaves to overthrow one of the world's most brutal plantation systems, grew ever more insistent until the rights-bearing citizen emerged as a political ideal. For a few magical moments, the radical Enlightenment's universal promises seemed within grasp. Then, in the face of the 19th century escalating imperialism, racism, and misogyny, the Enlightenment's vision of a universal brotherhood of liberty-living men evaporated. Today, millions of stateless people roam the world from Miramar to Kashmir and Afghanistan, from Syria and Palestine to the Sudan and Central America. Everywhere they confront heavily fortified border walls. I brought pictures for us. Border walls, Klieg lights, guard dogs. Despite worldwide outcries, democratic republics continue to hunt down aliens, separate families, imprison children in cages and filthy camps. Women are raped. Famine and cholera beset those globalizations has rendered disposable. Wars of ethnic cleansing decimate communities. Hundreds of thousands have drowned, making the Mediterranean, the Rio Grande River, the Indian Ocean into cemeteries. As Joyce has said, the UN Declaration of Human Rights has become a hollow promise. The cry, never again, a cruel and ironic mockery. How were the age of revolution's brave promises of progress, freedom, and equality, of fraternity, liberty, and democracy so brutally betrayed? In the course of 2 lectures this week, I will explore these betrayals from 2 distinctive perspectives. First, that of political theory, analyzing the contradictions embedded in the liberal Enlightenment's political theories of citizenship, equality, and unalienable rights. And second, historically, since I'm a historian and you will soon find I'm not that much of a political theorist, historically by tracing the Enlightenment liberals' fault lines to their origins during the Age of Revolution. Race and gender run as unifying themes through both theoretical and historical analyses. For race and gender are inseparably entwined and mutually constitutive. One cannot be understood in isolation from the other. Certainly contradictions and conundrums abounded during the tumultuous Age of Revolution. Having just overthrown distant imperial rule, in the case of the United States, absolute monarchies in the case of France, and murderous slave systems, Haiti, the new revolutionaries had to determine how they would govern themselves, which rights their new citizens could claim, and who among the republic's inhabitants could claim citizenship. Women as well as men, blacks as well as whites, the poor as well as the property, indigenous peoples as well as Europeans. Even more fundamentally, revolutionary republics had to decide whether rights were tied to citizenship and membership in specific nation states, or if they were innate, embedded within each individual regardless of his or her citizenship status. If the former, do citizenship rights trump human rights, justifying the exclusion of millions? If the latter, and rights are cut free from membership in a nation state, what institutions will defend an individual's universal human rights? On still another analytic level, can liberal political thought committed to the equality, the sameness of all, bestow empowering political rights on those perceived as, or who declare themselves to be, different, to be other? And this is a question feminists have asked. The issue of reproductive rights, for example, was not part of the American Revolution. This was not a right that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams fought for. Can it therefore be included in our Constitution or not? Because women's rights are different, or women's needs, I should say, are different than men's needs, Can rights be expanded? Can they expand? Can they open up? Or are they bound as an already existing bundle that we can grab or not, as the case may be? Now, these theoretical questions are equally historical ones. The rise of revolutionary republics coincided with the rapid expansion of plantation slave economies and with the relentless spread of European and U.S. imperialism. How could revolutionaries committed to the unalienable rights of all mankind determinedly defend chattel slavery, colonialism, and the dispossession, indeed genocide, of indigenous peoples? How could they proclaim citizenship and political agency the exclusive rights of white men, the exclusive property of white men? Yet they did so repeatedly. These are some of the enigmas and conundrums these lectures will examine. And perhaps, therefore, we should stop, because I do want this to be a discussion. And these are, as I said, issues, these are horrors that we read every day in our morning papers. So I think it'd be nice if we could start with a little discussion about some of the fundamental things. For instance, is citizenship worth fighting for? What does it do for you? What do you think about it? Is it important to you? It's important to me, obviously, but in your life, has it mattered much? How do we think about it?
Anyone care to respond?
Anyone? You don't have to agree. Can you imagine a better system of government? I mean, a lot of people have. Well, what do borders mean? Are borders just external, like cutting off Mexico from Latin America from the U.S.? Or are borders also internal? Like Joyce was just discussing. Any thoughts? I don't bite. Do you ever think about citizenship?
Yes, of course. Bertolt Brecht said, the noblest part of the human is his or her passport.
But what if the passport is an exclusionary document? I have it, you have it, who else, who doesn't have it?
And this is why it is the noblest part.
So it sets you apart from millions and millions of people that you have a passport. And you know, if you lose your passport, you sort of panic. Where is it going to, where? Can I get it? How quickly can I get it? Oh, about 10 years ago, must be longer than that, I was giving a class at, in New York City at the Graduate Center. And I asked the students the same question, which is why I was asking today. I said to them, what is it, you know, and I was thinking of citizenship as something we fought the American Revolution for. It's something you die for. It's something that gives you all these rights, this cornucopia of rights and privileges, etc. So I was thinking citizenship was rather important. And I looked at the class and I said, talk to me about citizenship. Why is it important to you? And they said, well, if we're in a foreign country and something happens to us, we can go to the consulate. And I thought, this is what we fought revolutions for? I didn't say that, but I did think it. And so I think that was maybe 15 years ago. And the tide of asylum seekers, the tide of the stateless had not reached such monumental proportions as it is now. But, I mean, citizenship maybe, maybe not, gives you the right not to end up in a concentration camp. But that's not exactly clear whether it does or not. What's happening in China now? Were those people citizens? that are now in internment camps? Over 1 million of them? Do they have a right, do their families have a right to protest or not? So these are questions that are actually very important, I think, and that I hope don't become terribly important in your own lives. But it's better to be prepared. I hope that we'll have more to say about citizenship in another hour. But I call this next section, which is really where I really started to work on this book and this project, is one day I asked myself, is citizenship the solution or is it the problem? Is it the problem or the solution to the crisis of statelessness, of human rights, of inclusion, both within the national borders as well as from outside the national borders? And I think to answer this, or to begin this question, this discussion, we have to ask first, what is citizenship? Where did it come from? And has it changed over time? Those of us whose citizenship has never been questioned, and I'm guessing that's true for a lot of you in this room, we most commonly think of citizenship as a cornucopia of rights, to freedom of speech and religion, to the rule of law, to equal protection before the law. Citizenship confirms us as political actors with the rights to choose our government, run for office, protest politically, and resist laws that we think are unfair. Every age since the ancient Greeks, political historian Eson tells us, fashioned an image of being political based upon citizenship. And Eson continues, citizenship has expressed a right to being political, a right to constitute oneself as an agent to govern and be governed. Without citizenship, there are no defensible rights, no political agency. Rights, liberty, and citizenship are, in fact, for us, indivisible. Yet throughout much of its history, citizenship was anything but liberal, liberating, or inclusive. To plumb the fault lines within modern citizenship, we must turn our normative understanding of citizenship as a liberating cornucopia of rights on its head and analyze citizenship as an exclusionary instrument. Modern citizenship, Eson tells us, emerged first in Italian city-states in the 15th and 16th centuries. Far from being a democratizing or inclusionary instrument, citizenship was initially deployed by newly emerging landed and mercantile elites as their exclusive property. All others were excluded. All, especially who challenged the elite's political and economic dominance, or who differed from them economically, socially, by religion. As a new form of social capital, citizenship was all about power. The power to dominate, to exclude, to consolidate their political and economic authority. An emerging class of civic humanist scholars, lawyers, and bureaucrats guided the new mercantile and military elites, draping them in the prestigious cloth of classical Greek and Roman imagery. Think of Erasmus or Niccolo Machiavelli. Their virtuous new republican citizen fused Aristotle's image of the zoon politikon, the selfish political servant and fearless warrior who would fight for freedom and political agency. They fused the zoon politikon with that of the polished gentleman, a man of wealth and leisure, classically educated and selflessly dedicated to the common good. Petty shopkeepers, lesser merchants, artisans, yeomen farmers, lacking the aristocratic citizen's social status, education, political experience, and vision, could lay no claim to political agency. The poor and the landless, The disposable flotsam and jetsam of emergent mercantile capitalism must be driven from the city to wander stateless across an early modern political and economic wilderness. In this way, civic humanists invented an exclusionary, homogeneous citizenship. Difference, be it racial, ethnic, linguistic, religious, or ideological, would sow disorder and division within the nation. To appear different was to appear dangerous. Those who were different must be excluded. By the late 17th century, however, a radical new political